Hi, this is Phil Wilato with the Defenders for Freedom, Justice, and Equality in Richmond, Virginia, author of In Defense of Iran, Notes from a U.S. Peace Delegation's Journey Through the Islamic Republic. The film you're about to watch is called The Man Who Changed the World and describes the rise to power in Iran of Ayatollah Ruhollah Mossavi Khomeini. It's the first of three segments of a series called Iran and the West, which was produced by the British Broadcasting Corporation and shown in February 2009 to mark the 30th anniversary of the Iranian Revolution. Of course, the BBC is funded by the British government, and the series begins its stories just before the Shah is toppled in the 1979 revolution, which is convenient since that allows the BBC to skip the story of Britain's long and sordid history of dominating Iran. This first segment also spends exactly one sentence mentioning the seminal episode in U.S.-Iranian relations in 1953 when the newly formed CIA carried out its first foreign policy coup by engineering the overthrow of the progressive, democratic, and Western-friendly government of Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh. That coup was carried out after heavy lobbying by the British government, which was furious with Mossadegh for having nationalized the Iranian oil industry, which the British controlled and ruthlessly exploited. Even so, the film provides fascinating insights into U.S. dealings during and immediately after the revolution. The award-winning British producer Norman Percy managed to get Jimmy Carter, who was U.S. president during the overthrow of the Shah, to sit down for his first interview about his role in those events. At that time, the Shah was, next to Israel, the United States' closest ally in the region, and the Carter administration was terrified it was going to be blamed for, quote, losing Iran. The Shah was a particularly brutal dictator who increasingly relied on repression and torture to maintain his unpopular rule, but he didn't trust his own military enough to order it to crush the growing protests. So, according to the head of the Iran desk at the CIA, Carter sent a U.S. general to Tehran to talk to the Iranian military directly about first overthrowing the Shah and then crushing the revolutionary movement. That's quite a different image of Carter than the one we know today, and shows that U.S. presidents, no matter how progressive they may seem on some issues, will always come down on the wrong side when it comes to protecting the real interests of U.S. imperialism. Now, a large part of the film concentrates on the student takeover of the U.S. Embassy and the holding of embassy personnel for 444 days. The commentator calls that event the main reason for decades of Western hostility toward Iran, which is interesting because the film clearly shows that it was Carter's allowing the deposed Shah to take refuge in the U.S. that infuriated the Iranian people and convinced their new leadership that the U.S. couldn't be trusted. The film does mention that the students, who acted without the knowledge of Ayatollah Khomeini, took over the embassy because they feared it would be used to try to counter the revolution. But the film neglects to mention that the 1953 coup was directed from that same embassy, so there was good reason for the students to be suspicious. And it also fails to mention that during those long 444 days, the students painstakingly reconstructed many thousands of pages of shredded embassy documents that proved the embassy was being used as a major espionage center in the Middle East. The notes were later published as a multi-volume series and are the reason Iranians still refer to the embassy building as the nest of spies. Probably the main error in the first section of the documentary, and one that's partly corrected by the extensive footage of the massive street demonstrations that played such a key role in the overthrow of the Shah, is the section's title, The Man Who Changed the World, referring to Ayatollah Khomeini. Khomeini was an incredibly important figure in the revolution. Because of his absolute intransigence against the Shah, he came to personify the deep desire of the Iranian people for change. And because of his skills in political strategy and tactics, he was looked to as a political as well as a religious leader. However, the title of this segment, and to some extent the film's commentary, can leave the false impression that the revolution was due to the influence of one powerful person. In reality, the Iranian Revolution was a profound social upheaval that depended on the participation of millions of people. Many segments of society played a role: students, intellectuals, the industrial unions, particularly in the oil sector, Marxist organizers, leftist guerrillas, and the progressive younger members of the military's officer corps. But the overwhelming force pushing for change were the poor and working people of Iran, who saw the Shah as a brutal dictator and a subservient puppet of the West, and so viewed the Shah's attempt to westernize the country as cultural imperialism. This is important because it's often argued that while the Iranian Revolution was a mass popular movement, it was hijacked by the clerical class. The working class in Iran was and is deeply religious, and that's why it voted overwhelmingly in a democratic referendum held on April 1, 1979, to establish a new Iran as an Islamic republic. Even the law that requires all Iranian women to wear the hijab and cover their hair, arms, and legs in public was adopted by a mass referendum that was promoted by large sections of Iranian women. It was a rejection of the West and all it stood for. Hopefully, this film will inspire viewers to look more deeply into the issue of Western hostility toward Iran, to look at the economic and political interests involved, and to conclude that only the Iranian people have the right to determine their own destiny as a country. The duty of Western progressives is not to pick sides in that internal dispute, but to help build the movement opposing war and sanctions against Iran. Thank you.